Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update from RAU'S. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading. Today we'll be taking up the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 3rd March 2021. Now the articles to be discussed are reflected on your screen and the time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So now let's begin. Now this article appearing on the page number 7 of the Hindu newspaper talks about the need for India to recalibrate its relationships with the European Union and how this relationship will help India to strengthen its manufacturing and to revitalize its exports. Now since this topic talks about the European Union and India's relationship, hence it falls under the mandate of GS paper 3 subsection International Relations. Now Brexit, as we all know, refers to the formal exit of the Britain from the 27 members political and economic union of the Europe. Now this withdrawal that officially began on the 1st January 2020 finally concluded with the signing of the post-Brexit deal on the 24th of December 2020. And thus this deal and its implication on India becomes extremely important from the point of view of the mains of 2021. So now moving forward, let us look into the key provisions of the Brexit deal, the challenges it brings for India and the opportunities that it holds for India. Now the Brexit trade and security deal, as was broken down between the United Kingdoms and the European Union, basically contains rules to guide how European Union and United Kingdoms will live, work and trade together. In this regard, it talks about various provisions starting from trades in goods, professional services, financial services, educational services, travel, security data, along with subjects such as fishing, mutual recognition of professional qualification, access to legal services, etc. Now moving forward, let us look into few of these provisions that might affect India in detail. So the first provision talks about the trade in goods. Now most of the goods traded between European Union and United Kingdoms, as suggested by the deal, will not face any tariff or quotas. That is to suggest that the market access for each other's goods will continue to remain tariff-free and will receive a quota-free treatment as they had received previously before the Brexit became a reality. However, this trade negotiation and free quotas are not absolute. These are limited with respect to provisions such as rule of origin and health and safety standards. Now, rules of origin refers to the new rule that require the UK to self-certify the origin of its exports to the European Union. That is, the UK will have to stamp that this product has been made in the United Kingdom. Now such declarations can be used in future to introduce new regulatory hurdles for the United Kingdom's product that it aims to export to European Union. Further, with respect to health and safety standards, now the European Union will require the UK's agriculture goods exports to be provided with health certificates and undergo sanitary and phytosanitary measures as was required for goods that were exported to European Union from across the world. Even India has to undergo these measures, and now since UK is no more part of European Union, it will be required to ensure its product meet the health and safety standards of the European Union. Now these regulatory hurdles that have been introduced, as you can imagine, will affect the trade between the two markets in near future. Now moving towards the second important point of the deal. Now this is with respect to the professional services. Now, by far United Kingdom has been one of the major supplier of professional services to the European Union. But from now on, there will no longer be automatic mutual recognition of professional qualification, and thus it will be a huge hurdle in export of professional services from UK to European Union. Now moving on to the third point, that is with respect to the financial services. Now the deal does not offer much clarity with respect to the future of the financial firms and how it will function between the UK and the European Union. Moving on to the next aspect, that is of education. Now here the European Union will be affected as the UK is no longer going to participate in the Erasmus exchange program, which was a European Union scheme that helps students to study in other countries such as United Kingdom. Now the students from the European Union will be restricted to study in United Kingdom, which is known for its education. Now next important provision is with respect to travel. Now the United Kingdom nationals will require a visa to stay longer than 90 days in the Europe in a period of 180 days, and hence this will restrict the movement of people, human resource and professionals. Now moving on to the last point, that is with respect to security and data. Now as per this provision, the UK will no longer have automatic access to the security database of the European Union. Further along, the UK will no longer be obliged to comply with the European standards. Now in 2018, the European Union introduced what is known as the Generalized Data Protection Regulation, which was also a question in the prelims of that year, which is by far the toughest privacy and security law in the world, to which UK had to oblige as far as it was part of the European Union. Now since these are very tough laws, the Brexit will help to get rid of this strict obligation that was imposed by the European Union upon its members. So while on one hand the Britain is gaining since it does not have to comply with the GDPR henceforth, but it also loses with respect to loss of automatic access to key security data that is very important from the point of view of the security of any country. And thus, as you can see, the Brexit trade and security deal envisages certain pluses and minuses for both the jurisdictions. Now let us look into how this deal affects India's interest and how it challenges India with respect to this new contemporary development. Now let us first look at the challenges that this deal brings for India. Now the first challenge is with respect to the Indian businesses that have been working in this region. Now since the existence of European Union single market, the United Kingdom has been the bridge through which the Indian companies have accessed the European Union's market. Now post-Brexit, this access would come to an end and this bridge would be destroyed. And thus the Indian companies will now have to strive separately for these two different markets. This will increase the overhead business costs, thereby affecting the competitiveness of the Indian business in this region. For example, Jaguar, which was owned by Tata, has enjoyed zero custom duty in the European market by far. But post the Brexit, they may face higher logistic costs, custom duties and other regulations, which will make these cars uncompetitive in the European Union market. Thus, clearly Brexit holds challenge for Indian businesses. Now moving on to the next challenge. Now this challenge is with respect to the exchange rate uncertainty that Brexit brings. Now as per the experts, the pound in the long term will undergo devaluation because of the Brexit. Now as the pound depreciates in value, the rupee would appreciate in value, since any two currencies in the exchange rate work inversely. When value of one currency increases, the value of other currency is bound to decrease. So now in this case, as the pound depreciates, the value of rupee is bound to appreciate. Now let us suppose the pound value as of now is 101 rupees. Now if the pound depreciates, it becomes expensive. That is, now you can buy 1.2 pounds for the same amount of rupees. And thus this is the pound that has become weakened while the rupee has strengthened in its value. Now when rupee strengthens with respect to pounds, then in terms of trade relations between India and Britain, the imports in India will become cheaper, while the exports from India to Britain will become expensive. As a result of which, the forex inflow will decrease while the forex outflow will increase, and as a result of which, cumulatively, India's current account deficit is bound to increase. And hence, it is said that the Brexit can result in enhanced current account deficit for India, which is a huge challenge. Now, moving on to the third challenge, that is with respect to goods trade between European Union and United Kingdom. Now, as per the Brexit deal, the good trade between these two economies are bound to remain free of tariff and free of quota, as we had previously discussed. Now, on immediate basis, India would clearly not benefit from such a pact, as Indian goods will not be much in demand given the trade between these two economies remain free of tariffs and quotas. However, as we had discussed previously, this free trade is not absolute and it has been bogged down by a lot of regulations, such as with respect to rule of origin, health and sanitary measures, etc. And hence it is suggested by experts that in long term this trade is bound to go down and India in this case will benefit. And hence in long term this becomes part of an opportunity for India to boost its trade, its manufacturing in India and its Made in India program. Now, moving on to the fourth challenge, it is suggested that the UK being one of the largest source of FDI to India, the Brexit will cause the FDI to fall, as the UK economy will in itself be struggling, and hence Brexit deal will have negative ripple effect in India in terms of reduced FDI from the United Kingdom. Now, the last challenge is with respect to the retreat of multilateralism and increased protectionism that deals such as Brexit is bringing to the world, wherein economies are increasingly looking inwards and are trying to close their borders so as to protect themselves from the uncertainties that are rising in this globalized world. Now, moving on to the opportunities that Brexit holds for India. Now, India is a robust economy with various factors that have been working in its favors that shall ensure these opportunities that arise out of Brexit are adequately captured by India. Now, this includes that India is one of the fastest emerging economy. It is the third largest economy. It has traditionally very strong ties with Britain. Given India was under Britain rule for 200 years, India has one of the youngest population while Britain has elderly population. India has lot of English speaking that can work as young human resource in aging Brexit. India has large diaspora and a strong lobby in both European Union and UK, and at last India is set to be one of the largest country by population, very soon overtaking China. And thus India has very strong factors such as English speaking population, younger population, fast growing economy, which shall help India to avail this opportunity at its best. Now, moving on to the second opportunity that Brexit presents. Now, it is suggested that now it will be easier for India to forge new partnership both with European Union and United Kingdom. As now post Brexit, both these economies will be looking for new trade partners. Now, it will be easier for India to forge a FTA, that is free trade agreement, with United Kingdom. Now, it is suggested that a well negotiated free trade agreement between India and UK has the potential to increase their bilateral trade by as much as 26%. Now, post Brexit, this negotiation will become easier. Further, there is another negotiation which will become easier is with respect to European Union. The India and European Union Free Trade Agreement, that is known as broad-based trade and investment agreement that has been long stalled for over a couple of years, will now become easier to conclude. As with Brexit come new set of possibilities. And then it will be manageable to conclude this deal that has been long stalled. Now moving on to the next set of opportunity, that is with respect to the service sector. Now, according to this Brexit trade and security deal, UK nationals, as we had previously discussed, will no longer have unlimited freedom to work, study, or start a business in European Union and vice versa. That is, the deal restricts travel, work, and other sorts of freedom between the nationals of the UK and European Union. Now, by far, the UK had the service edge and it used to export the service to the European Union. Now, India can benefit from this opportunity given its strength in the service sector. And this is one of the most important sector that is set to benefit after the Brexit deal. Now, next important point is with respect to freedom of movement that has come to an end post Brexit between the UK and European Union. Now, both the countries will try to look for human resources outside, and countries like India that have massive population that is young and robust can be a huge source of good human resource for these aging economies. Now, the last opportunity lies with respect to agriculture sector. As European Union has been a huge importer of food from the United Kingdoms. Now, Indian companies can fill in these shoes and serve as an exporter of agriculture product of which India is in a surplus to the European Union, and thus gain financially by exporting in the food and agro sector. So with this we had discussed the huge challenges and the massive opportunities that Brexit brings to India. Now it is upon India to make best use of Brexit and ensure that it gains maximum out of it. Thus, as discussed, Brexit clearly offers a favorable position for India to renegotiate its relationship with United Kingdoms and European Union in the coming future. Now let's move on to the next article. Now this article appearing on the page number 1 talks about how Sri Lanka has brought back India and Japan into its port project after last month it had ejected both these parties from the 2019 tripartite agreement that aimed to jointly develop the East Container Terminal of the Sri Lanka. Now this was done in lieu of the concerns related to the foreign involvement in the internal development of the Sri Lanka. However, reversing its previous stand, the Sri Lanka government has finally decided to bring in Japan and India, but this time it has brought them in with respect to the development of the West Container Terminal vis-a-vis the East Container Terminal that they were developing previously. Now let us try to understand these development vis-a-vis a timeline. So it was in May of 2019 that the previous regime in Sri Lanka under Maithripala Sri Sena signed a memorandum of cooperation with India and Japan to jointly develop and operate the East Container Terminal, wherein India and Japan were to jointly hold a 49% stake. However, the then opposition parties in the Sri Lanka had opposed to India's involvement in the construction of this port. Thus, after assuming power, the Rajapaksa government decided to form a 5-member committee to look into the concerns that were previously raised. Now, the government recently has decided to overturn the tripartite agreement that was signed between the three nations in order to develop the East Container Terminal. However, 1 month later, the government has went back to its old decision. However, this time it has went and requested Japan and India to develop its West Container Terminal. Now, this has been done in the overview of growing China's ingress in Sri Lanka with respect to its debt diplomacy, as is reflected in the case of Hambantota port, wherein the Beijing has pushed Sri Lanka into borrowing money from the Chinese bank to pay for the project, which had in particular no economic prospect of commercial success. Together with onerous terms and feeble revenue, this project has eventually pushed Sri Lanka into default with respect to the Chinese loan. at which point the Beijing demanded the port to be given as collateral to China. And thus Hubban Pota have been leased out to China for 99 years. And this is how the Sri Lanka has become a victim of Chinese diplomacy. Recognizing these problems, Sri Lanka has developed an insight as to how India is important to strategically balance China in the region, and hence it has brought back China along with Japan for development of West Container Terminal that lies in close proximity with Chinese run Colombo International Container Terminal, as is reflected in this picture. Now this south terminal is the Colombo International Container Terminal that has been developed by China, while on the east of it lies the East Container Terminal that was previously being developed by India and Japan collectively but was later rejected by the Rajapaksa government, citing concerns related to foreign ingress. However, in the recent development, as we have discussed, India and Japan have now secured the contract for development of Western Terminal. Now, this development reflects the greater recognition of India as a key player required to balance out China's growing ingress in the Indian Ocean region and in India's neighborhood. Now, this development reflects Sri Lanka's recognition of the same, and hence India has finally regained its strategic depth in the Indian Ocean region with this new contract for development of the Western Terminal that lies in the close proximity with the South Terminal that is being developed by China. And hence India can keep a watch on the development that Chinese government have been undertaking in this region. Now moving forward, let us try to see what are the other port developments that China has been undertaking around the India's neighborhood and Indian Ocean region as a part of its string of pearl policy, and how India is trying to counter these developments. Now, with respect to the Gwadar port that China has developed opens out in the Arabian Sea, India has developed Chabahar port in Iran. Further, India has developed the Dakkam port in respect to the development of the Dorhale port that has been developed by China in Djibouti. Further, with respect to the ports in Sri Lanka, we have already discussed the development of West Container Terminal vis-a-vis the China South Container Terminal and the Hubban Tota port that we had also talked about earlier. Further, with respect to Bangladesh, while China has been massively involved in development of Chittagong port, India too has been involved in using the Mongla port and as well as the Chittagong port. Further, with respect to Myanmar, China has been developing Kanpyu port, while India has developed the Sitwe port to counter this port. Further, China has developed a Malacca port along the Strait of Malacca, to counter which India has developed the Sabang port. And hence this is how India has been trying to counter the Chinese string of pearl policy through various port developments along with various policy measures such as the Project Mosam and so on. So in this article we have seen how China is trying to get into India's neighborhood and into the Indian Ocean region, and alongside we have also seen how India has been trying to counter it all through. Now let's move on to the next article. Now this editorial appearing on the page number 6 talks about the need of reviving the Iran deal. Now this article says talks about the Iran nuclear deal. It falls under the mandate of GS paper 3 subsection international relations. Now, after the former US President Trump unilaterally quit the Iran nuclear deal, it has been the recent US President Joe Biden that has been attempting to revive it. Now, this deal is also known as the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that has been signed between Iran and P5. Now, P5 refers to the 5 permanent members of the UN, that is namely China, France, Russia, US and UK, and plus 1 refers to Germany. However, with respect to reviving this deal, the President Joe Biden has put a condition before the Iran that it must start complying with the terms of the nuclear deal. While on the other hand, the Iran has asked US that had unilaterally quit to first remove sanctions. And this has become a pain point because of which the deal has not been able to achieve a breakthrough. And both these parties are stuck with respect to their own story. Now in this article, as we move ahead, we will discuss about the Iran nuclear deal, the arguments that UN and Iran are putting forth with respect to their side of the story, what implication does this situation have on India, and what steps can be taken to revive the Iran nuclear deal. Now let us first start by understanding the main provisions of the Iran nuclear deal. Now the Iran nuclear deal that was broken down in 2015 between P5+1 nations and Iran, it aims to curb the Iran nuclear plans. Now, as per the agreement, it allows Iran to accumulate small amounts of uranium only for research purposes, while it has banned the enrichment of uranium that could be used to make for reactor fuels and nuclear weapons. Now, as per the agreement, Iran must reduce its stockpile of uranium by as much as 98%. While with respect to the level of uranium enrichment, it needs to keep them at 3.76%, which is significantly below the level that is required for creation of a nuclear bomb. For the second important point of the agreement is with respect to limitation on the centrifuges. Iran presently has 20,000 centrifuges between the Natanz and the Fordo uranium enrichment facilities. But under this deal, Iran must reduce its centrifuge to as much as 6,104 in the next 10 years. Now, understanding the two main provisions of the Iran nuclear deal, let us try to understand what is happening presently. What is the US side of the story and what is Iran saying? Now, the US suggests that the Iran has rejected the European efforts to bridge the US-Iran talks. Further, it says that the Iran has failed to comply with the deal as it has accelerated its nuclear program. Recently, Iranian parliament also passed the bill that allowed itself to enrich uranium above the 20% mark that was banned as per the nuclear deal. Now, these are the concerns that have been raised by the US. While the Iran suggests that it was the US that had unilaterally left the deal and has instead imposed heavy sanctions over it, which has caused its economy to bleed, especially during the post-COVID times. And this is the Iran side of the story. Now, as you can clearly see, both the nations are trying to emphasize their own sides without trying to coming on to a conclusion and brokering a deal that ensures that the Iran curbs down with respect to its nuclear plans, while US is able to bring peace to the West Asian nation. That is critical for the security of this unstable and strategically important region. Now, understanding the situation, let us see what are the implications does that situation have on India. Now, India and Iran have strategic interest in keeping their relationship stable. For India is dependent on Iran for energy. Until 2010-11, Iran was India's second largest supplier of oil after Saudi Arabia. And hence, with respect to India's energy security, Iran is of utmost importance. Second is with respect to Chabahar port, that is a strategic port that India has in Iran. And it is very important, especially with respect to countering the Gwadar port that China has built in Pakistan, that we had discussed in the previous article. Now, the third major implication is with respect to the stability in West Asia. Since peaceful Iran is key with respect to the stability of this region that is fraught on various lines. Now, stability in West Asia is priority for India, especially with respect to the 8 million diaspora that live in this region and whose security is of India's prime interest. At last, Iran's situation tests the durability of India's strategic partnership that is stretched between its relationship with Iran on one hand and US on the other. And hence, it is in India's interest to fracture this deal as early as possible, because only when there is peace in Middle East, India can continue to ensure its energy is secure, its diaspora is safe, and its strategic interest in the region is pursued. So what must be done with respect to reviving this deal? Now, one of the most important steps is to revive talks between the two parties to create a conducive environment to reach a diplomatic breakthrough with respect to this deal. Further, the Iran can release the European and the American nationals that are currently in its custody as a goodwill gesture. Third, US can help clear Iran's application to the International Monetary Fund. This will not only help Iran recover from the COVID-19, but it will also help to enhance the supply of vaccines under the International COVAX facility. Further, European Union must start to fast-track deals that should allow the access of millions of dollars that have been stuck in the Instex pipeline and had to be reached to Iran. And at last, US must remove sanctions on Iran's political leaders that will help bring Iran closer to a diplomatic breakthrough. And at last, it is said that the revival of joint comprehensive plan of action is essential for considering the current political situation in Iran and to save Iran from turning rogue, such as the North Korea. With this, we come to the end of this discussion. Now moving on to the next article. Now let us see this article appearing on the page number 10 from the point of view of the prelims examination. Now this article has been titled as Himalayan serow spotted in Assam. Now the Himalayan serow, which is a mammal that is somewhere between a goat or an antelope, that it is not even a goat or an antelope, and it is somewhere a hybrid in between these two. And it has been spotted in Assam's Manas Tiger Reserve. Now here an important point to be noted down is that Manas is an international tiger reserve that stretches across two nations, that is India and Bhutan. Further, now let us look into certain important aspects about this Himalayan serow. Now, as per biologists, the Himalayan serow resembles a cross between a goat, a donkey, a cow, and a pig. It is basically a medium-sized mammal with a large head, thick neck, short limbs, long mule-like ears, and coat of dark hair. Now, as is reflected on your screen, the Himalayan serow looks like a hybrid of lot of animals. Now, there are several species of serows and all of them are found in Asia. Now, this is an important point from the point of view of the prelims examination. Further, these Himalayan serows are herbivorous and are typically found at the altitude of 2000 to 4000 meters. They are found in eastern, central and western Himalayas. That is, it is found all through the Himalayan ranges except for Trans-Himalayas. Further, as per the recent IUCN reports, the Himalayan serows have seen significant decline in their population size, their range size as well as the habitat in their last decade. As a result of which, they have been reduced from the near threatened status to the recent vulnerable status so as to grant them additional protection. Further, India has also listed Himalayan serow as Schedule 1 animal under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972, which shall provide absolute protection to this species to enhance their population in the near future. With this, we come to the end of today's discussion. Please make a note of these important points from the prelims perspective, as species questions are quite frequent in the recent years.